Pocket Con.
Yo, 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 yo! It's your boy DJ Kari, and welcome to Pocket Con. We're here for a special conversation, and right now I'm so proud to have with me. Everyone, make a little bit of noise for a legend that is in the house today. Make some noise for Miss Carole Holliday. How you doing, Miss Carole?
I am doing very well, Elgin. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Oh my God, no, thank you for being here. Like right now, I think we were, Pocket Con was about here right now, but now I think the scout just went about here, baby. So I gotta make some noise for you just for being here. Oh my God, yeah, y'all have no idea.
Pocket Con.
You have no
2020.
You have no idea how excited I am to interview this amazing lady. So I'm not gonna introduce. I'm going to make sure that Miss Carole gets a chance to tell you guys a little bit about her, who she is. But you have most definitely probably seen her work. If you have been enthralled with stuff like the Goofy movie with Rover Dangerfield, Prince of Egypt, she's done work. Oh my God, anything that has been probably included some black folks in Disney, then she was probably involved with it. So make some noise for Miss Carole Holliday. It is so much. So tell us a little bit, Carole, about your history, how you got started, and what we might know you for.
Well, Elgin, I have been in the animation industry since I graduated from college in 1986. I went to California Institute of the Arts, and originally I had gone there because I wanted to be a theater major. Because I grew up singing. I wanted to go to Broadway.
Okay, now, all right, go hit them notes, baby.
But I became a Christian in my first year there, and after I gave my life to Jesus Christ, I realized that I was going to have to probably compromise too much of what I believed. Because basically the theater school was like super hardcore. It was not, Broadway singing and dancing. It was, a lot of method, a lot of dark stuff. And I thought, well, I don't want to compromise what I believe. And so I also had friends who were in the animation department. And I went there and I talked to the dean of the school and I said, I would like to come to animation. And he was like, but you can't draw. And I said, well, God wants me in animation. And so he had me go off and do some quick sketches. I came back and he would send me off and do some more. And I came back and this went on for about 3 weeks. And finally he told one of my acquaintances, he said, Carole still can't draw, but we'll let her in on her enthusiasm. So, I always say, the king's heart, the Bible says, the king's heart is like streams of water and he turns it whichever direction he pleases. And so, yes,
right?
That's the animation. So that was my entrance into Cal Arts, and for the 3 years that I went there for animation, it was every year it was Carole is a nice person. That was pretty much.
That's that college Carole, I'm guessing.
That was it in terms of how they esteemed me. She's a nice person.
How did that feel, Carole, to like have somebody tell you like to your face, like, oh, you can't draw? Like, why wouldn't? Did you get discouraged like right after that? Like, how did you process something of that caliber?
I was just like, okay, well, this is what I want to do. So I just pushed through it. Oh, please make that go away.
They gotta see the growth, my love. They gotta see the growth. Come on.
Okay, that's right. See the growth and the shrinking.
Hey now. Lovely.
It's funny. That's a good question because I don't know why I know why I was able to push on, but my bigger concern was not that they didn't think I could draw, was my self-estimation that I couldn't focus for the amount of time it took to be an animator. I was an active person, even though I was big, I still was an active person. And so the thought of being somebody who sat at a desk all day and had to really be really focused was more of a challenge for me. Not the I can't draw, because I thought I could. So I just couldn't draw the way they drew.
Interesting.
You know, so you know, my classmates were like Tony Fucile, who, you know, people may a bunch of different people, Gregg Vanzo, who owns Rough Draft Studios. A lot of, you know, my classmates have gone on to become big time people.
Absolutely.
And so they were my influences and my sort of my inspiration, because they were people who grew up with being like full-fledged animation geeks. You know, I was an animation geek enough to know that when I talked to one of my animation people when I was in theater, he told me that day that they had seen Chuck Jones, that Chuck Jones had come to CalArts.
Chuck Jones?
Yeah, Chuck Jones. And I was like, oh my gosh, you saw Chuck Jones? And
Wow.
he's like, do you know who Chuck Jones is? And I'm like, yeah, he did the Grinch, and he did the Tom and Jerry's with the Chuck Jones, the Grinch eyes. And he was like, get out of theater. There's no reason why you you know. So, but, you know, all these people that I was going to school with, you know, grew up drawing geeky all the time. And I just drew. I wanted to maybe be like Charles Schultz, but my mom was concerned that I was going to starve. And so she had me get into all kinds of arts, you know, hoping that it would burn me out. And it backfired, and I wanted to become a theater person. So needless to say, you know, there's that saying, jack of all trades, master of none. So coming into animation, I was not as formed as a lot of my classmates. So, but I didn't take it personally when he said that, you know. So then, you know, when I graduated from school, the day that I was graduating, the dean called me. I happened to, like, I think walk by to like get some paperwork filled out, but he called me into his office. And he said, you know, Carole, he said, sit down, I feel like pontificating. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, when you first came here, you couldn't draw, but you're now a wonderful draftswoman, but you'll never work at Disney because you're black and a woman. Ooh. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I have to go now because I have to graduate. So, but that was my first job, you know, leaving out of school was Disney. You know, so it's like, yes. You know, I try not to listen to people when they tell me no, because A, I know that God is the one who's in control of my life, and B, you know, they can't stop me if it's not something I'm supposed to be doing. So it's probably all of A, but yeah. So
exactly. Can't stop, won't stop.
Yeah.
And speaking of can't stop, won't stop. Also, first off, I want to just acknowledge that you just said also, the first thing they're saying to you is, as a black woman, wouldn't even make it out there. How did that make you feel as a woman of color, especially as a black woman, to hear those types of words and to also have the type of career that you ended up having at this point?
You know, when he said that, I was like, really, I have to graduate. So I didn't have any time to sort of process that. You know, looking back on it, you know, I had a friend once who said, you know, you should go to his grave and go like, look at me now. And I'm like, you know what? No, because my entire career, I would not have had this career were it not for God. You know, so I'm just like, you know, that's your deal, dude. You know, that's how you feel. But, you know, when I at the time, I was applying to Disney. I was working at Marvel. Marvel used to have an animation studio before it became like, you know, this, I don't know if it's the same thing, but it was called Marvel. I assume it was. So they did Muppet Babies and My Little Pony. And that was Hanna-Barbera was my first job. Marvel was my first actual journeyman job. And I was working as a character designer on first it was Muppet Babies, and then I think it was My Little Pony. And I was always applying to Disney. I kept applying. And one day, and this was back in the day when you could actually meet people to have them look at your portfolio. And every time I would go in, I was meeting with Don Hahn, who's now like, big cheese. But Don Hahn was the person who was reviewing portfolios. And he took a look at my portfolio and he would say, your work is really good. You should do more life drawing. All I heard was, your work is really good. I didn't hear the part where it was, you need to improve. This is not you need to improve. This is an area on how you can improve. And so eventually, the church that I was going to, I had a friend who was like, I have a friend who's in animation. He works for Disney. He wants to come and present his little children's books that he's writing. And here's his phone number. And I'm all like, okay, what's his name? And she goes, Glenn Keane. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're friends with Glenn Keane? And she's like, you know who he is? And I'm like, oh my, yeah, he's like amazing. And so I contacted him. He came and he presented his books, these little children's books that are Christian allegories called Adam Raccoon. It's an Adam Raccoon series. But after he presented these books, I called him up and we talked, and I said, I keep bringing my portfolio to Disney, and I can't seem to get in. And he's like, well, I haven't seen it, but my recommendation, and he was on the review board, so it wasn't even getting to him, to them to see. He says, my recommendation to you is, he says, when I came to Disney, Eric Larson had seen my sketchbook and he looked at one little drawing in the corner of the page, and it was a life drawing. It was like a quick sketch. And he told me, Eric Larson, this old Disney animator, to go and do more of those. And so he said, I went out and filled up 5 sketchbooks doing those little quick sketches. And I thought, okay, well, if Glenn did 5, I'll do 7. And it was like front and back pages, And so I did all of that stuff. And then I basically threw away the first 5 books and took like 25 drawings out of the last one. And I put that in my portfolio and I got hired immediately. It was A, I had to get better, but B, listening. Part of being in this industry is like, everybody wants to go off and be a superstar out of the gate, but the truth is that you have to work together in a team. You have to be able to take direction. And so Don Hahn was telling me, this is how you get better. This is what we're looking for. And I was all like, but you say I'm amazing, and so it's like, okay, I'm going to take the direction. And I went ahead and did it, and I got hired. And so my first job working there was Oliver and Company.
Okay. And it's so yes, 1988 is when Oliver and Company premiered. Tell us a little bit more about like that experience working on your first big production.
It was really amazing. The people were super nice. George Scribner was awesome. When I went in to meet him in my first interview, once I was there, I went in. And one of the things I had heard when I got hired is that I over-animate. And so I said to him, I know that I over-animate. And he says, Carole, all new animators over-animate. He was really a sweet and patient man, and I had, great roommates that I sat in a room with, and we would listen to like radio shows while we worked. And there was one girl in there, Ellen Woodbury, who is now an amazing sculptor. And she was the one who got this training program going. It had gone before, but it's so funny seeing this. I haven't seen it in so long. So I was a training animator. It was called an animating assistant. And so I worked on that, and our scenes did not count towards quota. We still had to get them done, but I worked forever. There was like a scene that I did where Jenny, all their names were the same. I think it's Jenny. Pennies and Rescuers. Jenny crawls behind this vase, and she finds this letter that says, "Dear Rich, cat owner, you know, and that was my claim to fame. And but you know, I used to go into Glenn Keane's office all the time, and I would ask for help, and the people were just like really super. It was really a fun time at that particular point. You know, people were just like zany, and we just kind of lived in this little building, and that was kind of where I started doing my little voice stuff. I mean, I haven't done that much voice thing, but there is a scene where Georgette's doing leg lifts, and I'm the voice of the aerobics instructor. You know.
So you're finding a way to also incorporate not only your passion for animation, but also incorporating your voice acting in theater work at the same time. Did you ever imagine that would be the case, or?
No, not really, because you know, they say that animation people are actors with a pencil, and so the idea of trying to convey my acting drawing wise, it was like getting it from my head to my hand. I remember there was one time where, you know, Tony Fucile, who I mentioned earlier, came in straight out of school as an animator, you know, whereas I came in as a trainee. And one day I walked into his office and I had a scene of Oliver. What was he doing? He was he got some goo on his nose, and he, you know, rubs it off. And it's just a really super quick scene. And I was like, Tony, I really need your help. And so he took a look at that, and he did some really quick drawings, but he just kept going. And he was acting out the scene, and he was able to convey what he did with his face and his body in that little quick drawing. And I was like, that was a school for me right there, watching him actually act and then draw what he acted. I was like trying to just draw and imagine, you know. He was actually feeling it in his body. And that was a lesson for me at that point, and it was a lesson that I had to be reminded of 5 or 6 years later, when I went to, after The Little Mermaid, I went to Disney TV, and I did character design on the Little Mermaid TV show.
Yeah.
Where I was just doing drawings, you know, really light, quick drawings, and somebody walked into Jamie Mitchell's office. He was the then producer of the show, the executive producer on that show. And this was a fellow who looked at those drawings. He didn't know who had done them, but he said, a girl drew those, didn't he? Jamie told me this. And I was like, why would he say that? And he said, because they're just really super light drawings. And I was like, oh, okay. You know, I didn't know what to do with that. I just drew how I drew. And
another thing I was thinking about also is like, is it true that especially in the animation department, that most women were just like, especially in the early days, most women were only colorists? Is that true?
Yes, that was in the way past.
Okay.
Not by the time that I got into it. Now, there weren't a lot of women animators. When I started, I know there was Kathy Zielinski. She was amazing. She is still amazing. She, like if Frollo in Hunchback, that's Kathy.
Okay.
But there were not a lot of women animators. There were women assistants and cleanups, and definitely women colorists. That's Glenn Keane's work right there. That stuff is Glenn Keane's beautiful work. So,
and you were also an assistant on animation assistant for The Little Mermaid.
That was a training. That wasn't an animation assistant. That was an animating. I know it's really confusing, but it was the same position on Oliver and Company that I became on The Little Mermaid. And so I was that little fish, that one that you just showed with that was my fish.
Hey,
that was my fish from his back,
Mr. Flounder.
Yeah, so it was, once again, my footage did not count to quota. So we were just there to learn how to be animators. You know, I animated the dolphins at the very beginning of The Little Mermaid. It's like the little specks, you know, and then the side shot of the dolphins, you know. But they took forever to draw. It's like 5 feet of animation, but it took forever, you know. So it was training. But in the midst of that, you know, what would look like to some people, like we were talking earlier before the recording, where you were saying that you're making the best of a challenging situation, like elevating your skills, and this is amazing. But you wouldn't have had that time if it were not for the slowing down of the pandemic.
Yeah.
When I was on The Little Mermaid, one of the things that happened is that Glenn Keane was using photostats. Photostats are, they would video the scenes, and then they would print out every other frame, like as in little photos, and then they would put like a animation peg strip beneath it, so that Glenn could use that for reference for his character of Ariel. Now, he had to trace those photostats so he could see the action, and then take that and then animate from that. And that was the tracing was a big process. And they said, okay, you have a lot of, I think it was like 300 feet to do, and this process is slow for you. He said, so they said, so we're gonna take away some of your footage. And he was like, no, just give me somebody to trace the photostats for me. And they said, okay, you take one of the animating assistants. And he was like, no, they need to learn how to animate. And they're like, this is the choice. You either take an animating assistant or you lose some of your footage. And so he picked me because, we were friends and I would be in there all the time. Well, that meant everybody else was learning how to animate. And I was suddenly, now I'm not animating, I'm tracing photostats. And it was like,
No respect at all.
But it was amazing because I started to see how action worked, because I'm like, she's running towards the camera, so she's getting bigger, and look, there's depth. And so all of these things that I thought were going to be like a negative were actually a positive. And as time went on, he said, hey, let me give you a scene that I have roughed out, and I want you to put, like, for example, I want you to put Ariel's face on it. It was the scene where she's swimming up away, and in part of your world, and she's swimming up away out of away from the camera. And he says, I want you to put her face on it. And it was kind of like you were looking up at her, and I did like that. And he said, okay, never mind. He says, because if that's the attitude you're gonna have, then I'm gonna have to redo it.
Oh,
and I'm
wow.
like, no, I'll do it. And, we went to lunch one day, and he's like, Carole, you have got to have confidence. He said, when I was in high school, there was a girl this cheerleader who dated me. And I was like, why are you dating me? And she said, because you enter a room like you belong there.
Hey, facts.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so every time I, felt like I was going to be afraid of something, I just remembered that. It's like, you have to enter a room like you belong there. Not like you're like, hey, you have to listen to me, but it's like that you have a place.
Absolutely.
And I learned that from working on that and tracing those photostats, which ended up being really good, because later on, I said I want to become an animator, and they were looking at my scenes, the sum total of the scenes that I had done on The Little Mermaid, and they said, before I said I wanted to be an animator, one of the supervisors said, if Carole were the last person on the face of the earth, I would not promote her to being an animator.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's something interesting, because it looks like, from my standpoint, it looks like everyone kept telling you no, and you kept being like, let me prove you wrong. You know what I mean?
It's not like prove. It's just like, okay, because that person said that, but Glenn was like, she just needs help. She just needs somebody to guide her. So they assigned me to somebody who is going to be my mentor. And I said, okay, you know what, for me, I need to come up with a little program to train myself. So I decided I was going to do some life drawing, and there was like several things that I can't remember now, but I said I was going to make a little training program. And one of the things I was going to do was animate a scene, animate a sequence. And so I storyboarded out a little sequence of a boy, climbing over a log and picking up a rock, and then, beating his chest and then running off. Just really super simple. I animated that. And because of the stuff that I had traced in photostats, and because of my time working with Glenn, for that I don't even know, it was 3 months. It was a time that people would think was wasted. Oh yeah, so that time that you would think would be wasted because I was tracing photostats or just doing in-betweens, excuse me, by the time that I presented my storyboard, my request to them in a tape where I said, hey, I want to become an animator, the person who was in charge of the tape, I made the mistake of, instead of getting a new tape, I put it on the same tape as my old stuff, but I left some space between it. And I said to this guy, I said, don't push play. I mean, don't push rewind, just push play. It's queued up to where it's supposed to be. He pushed rewind. So they ended up watching everything I did on The Little Mermaid, which was, you know? And then they saw my test that I had done over the summer. And they said, nobody grows that much in that short a time.
Wow.
You know, so they asked my mentor, had he done it? And he says, you know what? I didn't even have any time to train her.
Wow.
You know,
so it was your perseverance that pushed you forward.
Yeah, and it was just practicing, and not even just perseverance and practicing. It was that menial pushing up the rock up the hill of tracing photostats. You know, the time when I went into Glenn's office and he said, here, I want you to in between the scene. I went off and in betweened it. I came back, he rolled it. He says, okay, this looks good. And he took every single one of those drawings out, threw them away and said, now go back and draw it like me. You know, the hard stuff or the menial stuff was what enabled me to 3 months later present a sequence where they went, she couldn't have done that. You know? So yeah.
So we have to get into this conversation about someone, and I have a confession to make. All right.
Yes.
You were a part of creating a character that has caused a lot of controversy in the fairy community.
Oh dear.
I recently found out yesterday that there is a petition that has been signed because a certain character is way too cute, and it has affected many young men in communities. And that character is Roxanne from Goofy.
That is so weird to me.
It is. My sister sent it to me. It is an actual position. They're like, Disney needs to apologize for creating Roxanne because she's way too cute, and people, it was just you messed a bunch of kids up who had their first crush being this character from the Goofy movie. But no, I'm just playing.
That's okay. I hope so.
But no, there really is a petition. I actually did see it. I'm gonna post it up so people can actually see it. But it's a real petition. But yo, I recently asked a question about whether or not Goofy movie is a black film, and I got a lot of folks that were saying it kinda is. I don't know.
Why?
I don't know. It's something about like that story of like Roxanne and Max, and like the relationship between the father and son. Like a lot of black kids were able to identify with that, you know. And I think it was like Powerline. It's just something that would just had like such a hip hop flavor to it that it really got embraced by the black community. Like I don't know, but
I find that interesting. That is all Kevin. You know, Kevin Lima is as white as can be. You know, and that's and you know, I have to credit Kevin because he is an amazing storyteller, and he's somebody who really, you know, learning to tell emotional story. I learned from Kevin because he connected his growing up. I don't want to tell his story, but he connected his growing up to, you know, if you look at the movies that he's directed, they are coming from his experience and his life. So, you know, the thing about good storytelling is that if it's really good, it's universal. you know. So it can be accepted by a Black person, it can be accepted by an Asian person, it can be accepted by a white person. It's a universal story, you know.
Tell us a little bit about the process of creating and preparing to put a character like this out. I heard a little bit about like the fact that Roxanne's design, and especially something about the way that her hair flows, was really institutional for the had a lot to do with the character that you were just talking about with Ariel. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, I was working on the Little Mermaid TV show, and Kevin came in and he said, you know, he had been snooping around my office while I was gone at lunch, and he said, you know, we need a design for Ariel. I'm sorry, we need a design for Roxanne, but we can't pay you because we just, you know, we have a character designer and we want a different take. Would you mind doing it for free? And I was like, no, I don't mind. You know, Kevin and I had gone to school together, and you know, it was not a big deal. And so I just sat down and just doodled her at lunch, you know. Kevin gave me some direction, but I just doodled her at lunch. And so because I was working on the Little Mermaid, her hair is Ariel's hair. I mean, if you look at Ariel's hood, it's, you know, it's her hood. But that mole is for a long time. When I was a little kid, my signature to all my drawings, for some reason, was a cockroach. I have no idea. It was a little cockroach. As I got older, the signature on my drawings became the mole. So I gave her the mole, and if you look at my character in Fish Out of Water, which we'll talk about a little bit, she has the mole. But it's like that was my thing that I was putting on my characters for the longest time. I was also working with high school kids and at my church, and so I just sort of imbued all of the things that I knew about high school kids into Roxanne, and also the other characters. I didn't do every character, but like a lot of incidental characters. I just did a bunch of high school kids that I knew. You know, at the time, the girls were wearing those shirts with, they're now back, but the shirts with the no sleeves and the torn up, that was when the torn up pants were like, hey, I'm going to pay $80 for a pair of pants that are all torn up. And the guys had their pants down with their boxer shorts coming out of it.
Yep.
Not like they are now, where they're down around their butts, but it was like, you know, the other pants were up. So there was like a lot of characters that I saw as like, if you look at these characters, they look like me.
Yeah, yeah. No, I you know, it just makes so much sense, because it was like, I think, like, as weird as it may sound, but it's like, I feel like the reason why a lot of Black folks have probably embraced this film and have seen such themselves in it is probably for exactly what you just said. Like, literally, that these characters were coming from your thoughts, your creations, and they were your drawings. So instinctively, you just added so many characters that feel like friends that I know. You know what I mean? Like, it's so strange. Like, I know these are supposed to be anamorphic, like, dog characters or whatever. But yeah, it's like I see myself in it. And I think that's the reason why, you know, cartoons like this and representation kind of like matters. This can be anyone's high school. It's not too rich looking of a high school that I would not be able to assess it. But also, it has so many different elements that just felt like a lot of people's high school experiences. And I think that comes through a lot with the normal looking character designs, that, you know, like characters that look like high school kids. And
I mean, you know, I did the character design, and not all the characters, like I said, not all the characters. Because they were like, you know, like the guy with the hair and the vest. But this was all Kevin. You know, I have to say, Kevin was a genius. You know, and at the time, I just thought it was, you know, just a cartoon.
I want to talk a little bit about that. Did you think that this cartoon, like, because I don't know if you've heard, but like, the Goofy movie still has like a ridiculous cult following at this time. Did you think when you were working on this that this movie would literally still be talked about in the vein that it is?
No, it was. I didn't. As a matter of fact, I didn't know it had as much of a following until maybe about 20 years ago. A friend of mine found out that I worked on the Goofy movie. She was, probably in her 20s. She found out I worked on the Goofy movie. And the next time I saw her, she brought me a pair of Keds. And she had wanted me to draw Roxanne and Max on each shoe.
Oh, wow.
And I was like,
can I take you up on it? No.
I was like, wow, okay, why? And then I started seeing that, people your age really, that was something to you, so I was like, huh.
No, yes, I think absolutely. It's if it isn't like the power line scenes or Max trying to impress Roxanne or something like that, like it's just so many. I don't know. I don't think that when they created this particular cartoon that people thought that it was gonna be like this transformative for so many folks and whatnot. So. Yeah. It's just you did you helped out
totally
with the time in a capsule right there with this.
I'm sorry, I talked right over you. Sorry about that.
Oh no, you're fine. I was just saying that you caught some lightning in the bottle with that one. You also did some work with Prince of Egypt as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, what was that experience like? And that's another huge film as well, like with beautiful animation, like storytelling. It won Grammys. You don't have to talk too much about that, but like briefly, if you wanted to just say a little bit about your experience.
It was
that
was when I really got into storyboarding, because like I said, I wanted to be an animator, and I actually went to France, took a pay cut to work on the Goofy movie to have the opportunity to animate. But when I came back, am I getting this in the right order? I feel like, okay. I came back. I didn't have a job. I'm feeling like this is somehow out of order. But I ended up working on the Prince of Egypt for a short while, and in the end, I ended up not staying on Prince of Egypt because they were going to, for me, alter the Bible too much, and so I couldn't. The Bible is real for me,
right on.
So I couldn't alter the Bible, and so I was like very thankful for the opportunity to work on it and to work in story, but I ended up leaving, and then from there I ended up going into Tarzan.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's and that's interesting too, because like it's two very male lead type characters, and like that's really interesting, and I do kind of see the similarities, especially like in the animation style as well.
Yeah. And Tarzan, that's another Kevin movie. And that was what solidified my storytelling, was working on that film for 3 years on 5 sequences.
Right on.
Animation, for everybody who is interested in animation, especially storyboarding, is you have to have a lot of patience. In the feature division.
Absolutely.
And granted, I know things may have changed a little bit since when I did Tarzan, but I did the treehouse sequence in Tarzan, and part of everybody worked on Stomp, but also when the family comes to the island at first, some of that stuff in there is my storyboards, and also when Tarzan takes Jane to meet his family, I did some of that work. And then also when Jane comes back to the island, but it was 3 years. I would be like, I'm done. Oh no, I'm not. It's back.
Wow. That's so intense. And speaking of storyboarding, you have some new passion projects that you're working on as well. So I want to make sure we get a chance to talk a little bit about that as well. This really amazing, if you just search up Carole Holliday, one of the first things that you will find is this really great animatic and storyboard for this group called for a story called Fish Out of Water. Tell us a little bit about this amazing, jazzy, cool looking, joint that you're working on as well. Tell us a little bit about this.
Thank you. Well, I had seen When Harry Met Sally, when it came out in 1989 or something like that. And my dad was a big jazz fan. And he was like, here's some records with jazz music. And I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm not interested in that. But when I saw When Harry Met Sally and heard the soundtrack that Harry Connick Jr. did, I was like, okay, maybe my dad had something because I loved big band. So, initially I wanted to do a story that had Harry Connick Jr., and this was before Harry Connick Jr. was in Iron Giant. But I loved his speaking voice, I loved his singing voice, and I wanted to do a story with him in it. And then as I thought about it and worked on the story, I was like, you know what? Okay, I'm a woman. I need to tell the story from a female perspective. So I went ahead and made it the girl instead. And then as time went on, I was like, okay, I'm also a black woman because she was black, but I'm also a black woman. So I need to make sure I'm not doing a story where there's a white guy helping a black girl find her voice. So this was before I realized there was that whole white savior thing that's such a big deal now.
Oh yeah. It's a thing. Most definitely a thing.
So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to make them black. And then I was like, wait a minute. Walt Disney said, why do something in animation that you can do in live action? So I had to make him not just a guy, I had to make him magical, which meant he could have black features and have purple skin, you know? So it kind of evolved from there, where the story became magical and musical at the same time, and so that's it's a story that I kind of put to the side, because initially when I was pitching it, people would say, we really like the story, but this was like, back in the early 90s. They're like, good luck getting it done because it's black. And this was, before Princess and the Frog. And so Hollywood was pretty down on African-American stories in general.
Well, if there is any time to try to get this out, then I think that let's put all the positive energy out there. You know what I mean? That we can get this one up and going. It looks like an amazing story, and I can't wait to see how this is going out. It's real interesting too, considering that this animated exists, but then we have a movie like Soul about to come out.
I know. I found that out afterwards. No, don't make that face.
I'm just saying.
Don't make that face. You know what? I believe that an idea is supposed to get out, and so it gets dropped into a lot of people's heads. So the difference I haven't seen Soul yet, and I'm going to wait until my idea is finally either dead or out before I see it. Okay. My story is it's an actual musical, whereas Soul is not a musical. This is more about, this is me. It's totally me. I mean, there is this animatic is just an idea for it, but there is literally songs in the story. It's a different, and this is what I said to somebody once, that if you've seen Hamilton, the ending thing that Aaron Burr comes to the conclusion is that there's enough room in the world for more than one amazing person.
Facts. Yes. Absolute facts. That is an absolute genuine fact.
So that is my thought on this. Soul is coming out, but hey, there's enough room in the world for a story about a girl jazz trumpet player in the 40s.
Man, I absolutely agree, and I hope to see that this comes out. And if would you ever consider doing it independently? You know what I mean? If you got the team together for it, or?
Oh, sure. Oh, definitely. That might end up being the only way I can get it done. But that's a money issue.
True.
Yeah.
Well, if you are watching this and you know our way to be able to get some money Carole Holliday's way, this is the way to do it. Hit her up on her social media, because she has all this great stuff. And as you can see, she's extremely talented. She most definitely has the credentials, and she can make this happen. So I'm just pushing that your way and hoping that comes to be. I just wanted to also end with two quick questions, because we're coming down to, unfortunately, to the end of our time. But the one thing I would like to ask first off, and I've been asking this to everyone, is why do you feel that representation matters?
It's the there's a test that kind of initially for me, So that's an interesting, it's a multi-layered question, because I just got into animation just because I like doing it, and I've heard people say, had I known that there was somebody like you, then I would feel like I could go in there. And I'm like, I just went just because that's where I was going. I just went because that's where God wanted me to go. I didn't go because I saw any other Black people. But that being said, at one point there was, I have two stories. At one point there was a film that was being worked on that had an African-American person in it. And they asked me to come in and give them some, my thoughts on it. And I was like, I don't want to. I don't have time to educate you on this. But that night on YouTube, it was like something you might want to watch. And it was a piece from this girl had done a little documentary, and she had recreated and I'm sorry, I try not to cry. She had recreated the black doll test. And at one point she was asking these kids, which was the good doll, which was the bad doll, and they had a white doll and a black doll in front of them. And, the kids were like, going to the white doll. And at one point, she asked this little boy, she says, why is this white doll good? I mean, why is this doll good? And he said, because it's white. And then she asked this little girl, which is the good doll? And the little girl picked the white doll. And then she said, which one is the bad doll? And then she picked the black doll. And then the woman said to the little girl, which doll is like you? And the little girl was like, and pushed the doll forward. The shame on her face was like, that's why I had to say something. Not because, I wanted to fight the power, but it's just like, I want that little girl to not be ashamed, when she picks up a little black doll that looks like her. So, that, I think that everybody matters. I think God made everybody. But at the same time, I also want to be somebody who's just like, you know what, hey, look, there's Black people too.
Hey, yep. Absolutely. So,
yeah. But, that being said, I think a lot of times, especially in these days, people are like mad and, they want justice, and justice is good. But, I have white friends who are all like, I had a Black story because I wanted to tell a story, but now I'm afraid to tell it. And, I was in another studio in a meeting just doing some development work. And they had described the character as she had a cute little hairstyle, but they described it as a wild hair. And then they talked about her mom as having wild hair. And I said, I know this is not my place because I'm just here doing development storyboards, but you might not want to call African-American hair wild.
Yeah.
And the person said, oh, is that a trigger word? And I was like, I don't know. I just probably, you don't want to say that. And they're like, well, what should we call it? And I said, natural?
Natural hair. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But the thing was, it was a main character for a show. So people have a tendency to focus on the unfortunate use of words and miss out on the fact that they were doing a show with a lead Black character. Mm-hmm. So it's changing. People are trying, and I think we want to have representation, but we also want to be patient with the people who are trying to represent. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And also, when it comes to, and I also echo your statement earlier where you were saying, sometimes I just don't feel like educating you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I get it, and, but I also want to say that, in these processes, just you being in the room is enough, and it's in whether I know you've been given a lot of love and respect to these other the Jeff and everyone else who whose main idea, but you were so important to all of those processes and roles and understanding. You know what I mean? Because would we have all that personality come out if you were not in that room? You know, I think about people like Dwayne McDuffie as well. You know, it's like how much his influence, Bruce W. Smith, how much his influence, you know, has affected some of these movies, roles, cartoons, Disney animation specifically. Like, would we have Goof Troop in the way that it had been represented if it was folks like you not in the room as well? So I just want to make sure that we give our flowers to you during this time. And thank you so much for, you know, being a pioneer in animation and just getting that into step. Like a little bit earlier about how not only were women like only allowed to be colorists, but now we have women that are animators doing their own thing as well. And not only that, but you're an animator when they told you could not be, you would never be that. And you're a black woman too. So come on now. It's just, how could you not? So, we're finally, what's the best way for folks to be able to stay in tune with you if they want to, you know, donate or like help you out on your journey and your project? What's the best way to stay in tune?
You know, you connect with me on Instagram. Carole Holliday. Elgin is very kind enough to put that underneath there. That's not just my name. That is also my Instagram.
Hey, now. Get her some followers. Come on, y'all. We can do better than that.
It looks like I got 3.
Hey, there we go.
But yeah, no, I appreciate any contact that way. And you know, as I have time, I answer questions. You know, if I get like occasionally young people that ask me questions, and I try and make the time to answer them because, you know, I had people who were kind enough to me who answered my questions as well. There we go. We're back.
Okay. But yeah, no, thank you. No, and I echo that. Thank you. I'm only a reflection of personalities that are being bestowed upon me. So please continue to stay in tune with Carole Holliday. Check out her amazing website, her portfolio. If you guys have any questions, you know, in the comments or anything like that, hit her up on social media. I'm so excited. Follow her on Twitter. You know what I mean? I'm about to hit that follow right now because I ain't realize you had a Twitter, and bam, now it is. So I'm about to follow you on that too. Yeah, it's been such a pleasure. Any final words for the folks or any advice for any other young black person who may be seeing you for the first time? You know, just anything you want to say as a final word.
You know, I guess the thing that I would say is, you know, sometimes people aren't good. But if you really believe in your stuff, get your work out there. You know, you may not get into your dream job immediately, but the internet is amazing in that there are people that I follow on Instagram or whatnot who you see their stuff from 5 years ago and their stuff now, and it's like, oh my goodness, you know, they kept putting work out there. So if you want to do something, I'm not saying don't take no for an answer, but don't take no for an answer in that they will stop you from drawing.
Yes.
Keep drawing.
Keep drawing. You got this. Thank you so much for checking this out. We have more amazing stuff happening coming at you all way. Thank you so much for rocking with PocketCon. PocketCon. Shout outs to Kid Mental for making all of our drops. Thank you, Ms. Holliday. I really appreciate you being here and for your love, your energy, and just existing, because that is enough. It is simply enough, and I just want to make sure that I continue to tell people that. Thank you guys for rocking out with PocketCon. Please stay in tune with us, and we'll enjoy the rest of the show. Much love to everybody. We appreciate you. Much love. Peace out.